Hello, my name is Nee, and I'm a gambling addict. Hi, Nee. That's about as funny as it's gonna get. This is more of a serious conversation. Um, I my name is not a moose, and that's what I like to go by. I am one of the youngest millennials out there, on the edge of that. But when I turned 18, it kind of just started from there. When turning 18 and being able to gamble in some ways, like scratchers never really did it for me. It was more of horse racing. And about this time when CS:GO took off, there was betting sites on professional Counter-Strike matches with CS2 Lounge and other Dota 2 Lounge websites that got involved in this. And way back in the day, this was about 2014, and iBuyPower was on their run, and Steel Complexity and Steel and the other actors involved in this threw a match on that. They were on a win streak of I forget how many, but it was super one-sided, and I was betting at the time. It was six op Asimovs and other guns. I had a collective inventory of $300 in there. And at the time, that was a lot of money going to college, paying for college, and not having any free money to my name at the time. I mean, I was cash flowing everything myself, working 40 hours a week, going to college another 20. Anyway, that being said, I pretty much burnt everything I had, like, in that whole fiasco. And, well, that was a lesson learned. I said to myself, I got to stop doing this. And, well, that bought me some time until about, it was about like 2 years later. I had picked up trading stocks in the stock market. And it was about 2015 at the time where you had to pay per trade. It was still the pay to play business model of E-Trade and the other websites. It wasn't it wasn't bad, but the first trade I made was of a silver mining company, and I got a 20% return. It was pretty pretty remarkable, and must have been in 1 month's time. And I thought I turned like 2 grand into 2,500 or something like that. Something pretty incredible. And I was so happy with myself, thinking to myself, I'm a god. I am unstoppable. And I rolled that trade the next day into the stock symbol LIVE, live. And at the time, it was trading for, might have been $5-10 a trade a share. It was before the run up, and I had held it for, it must have been 30 days, and it was something to behold. I mean, it was legendary. I pulled out my stock, and not 4 hours later, had been a news update with the company that the FBI and other government agencies had been investigating them. And by that time, the stock had crashed 50% of what it was. It looked very suspect, and I mean, I I walked away turning 2,500 into like 5 grand, and I thought to myself, this is so easy, and I got hooked. It was the worst possible thing that could ever happen to you. It was a glimpse of like taking your minimum wage job and thinking, oh my god, I can be rich. Well, we all know how that goes, right? It's a roller coaster. It's the quick ascent to the long, tenuous crash. I had pretty much forgotten about my money in that account. A couple years later, it was no, it 2017, 2018. I I had pretty crazy debt with a car that I couldn't afford that I was driving, and I mean today today I would have hated every single thing about that purchase, but the reality is I had started putting away 50 to, excuse me, $500 to $1,000 a month into a stock trading account in which I had grown up little by little, day trading back and forth, holding stocks, and I was day trading Bitcoin at this time. And it had just been right after the crash of 17,000, and it was fluctuating between 6 and 9 grand pre 20. It was like 2018, 2017 at the time. Anyway, it was still worth a pretty penny, and I buy one, sell one, make a couple $100, repeat that, and by the end of 2018 and 2019, I I had about 10 grand, and I was going to continue to roll that money. I had a paid off car. I'd sold the junk one that was eating up all my money. Pretty much had no expenses at that point, and I was just rolling everything into this to hopefully buy a house for down payment for the girlfriend and I at the time. And in 2019, I rolled that money from like 10 grand into like 15, just regular deposits. It was something weak like that. It wasn't anything to write home about. Well, the gambling problem really kicks in right when you're at your lowest, right? So when I had just been broken up with in late 2019. I had I'd been real depressed and looking for an outlet, and with it being an addict of sorts, you understand that you can't exactly touch alcohol or smoke or do other things with the greenery, because if you touch it, it's you're not going to be able to put it down. And I've seen that happen with too many of the people in my life, friends, some distant family members. And well, I turned to gambling in late 2019. This was like after Thanksgiving. And I had started with 15 grand, and the worst thing you can do in the stock market is touch margin. And I started gambling with margin, and I didn't do any calls or options at that point, but if I would have touched that, I would have been broke. But I was buying and selling on margin, day trading. I had turned 15 into about 20 in about a month off a couple stocks. And it got to the point where I was getting serious about looking for a house, and this is like the second time in my life where I had legitimately been searching for a house. And in December of 2019, I'd be like, okay, I want to buy a house at a college town because it always have demand for it. So I had looked for a house and got outbid. So I just put that in hold, and I was kept looking for a house. And in that time, it was been like 3 4 months until I was ready again. I had saw that the news in January said that of a virus in China. It was swarming all over, and I did the math on the time it took freight ships to go from Shanghai, China to America. And I did the math on that. And I knew Chinese New Year's was in February, and the entire economy shut down for 1 week for that. And I did the math, and it was like 6 weeks for a cargo ship. So I did the math. 6 weeks plus that 1 week, it'd be 8 weeks. And I was so out of control with my gambling at this point that I had pretty much just went wild with this. I mean, I was on margin. I was stressed to all belief. I slept maybe 3 hours a night, if that. It was horrible. I'd wake up at 6 in the morning, 3 hours before market open, do all sorts of research and way too much effort into this. And it was the worst thing that could have ever happened. I got no sleep. I was single. I was pulling my hair out. It was horrible, man. It controlled my life. The worst thing that could have happened, right, was I was exactly right with my predictions. Once again, I didn't understand options, and I still don't to this point. I understand them, but not to the extent that where I should be playing with them. And I was exactly right in the time frame that everything shut down. I predicted it right. I heard turn 20 grand, excuse me, 15 grand from Thanksgiving into what was a quarter way of March into about 40 grand off of like a few trades. One of which returned $10,000 in a matter of a weekend on stocks, not on options, on stocks. I predicted everything perfectly. And then I had a meltdown and I sold everything. I cashed out. And this was after the first spike down. And I just meltdown after meltdown. This was the peak of 2 weeks to slow the curve, and I couldn't handle any of this. It was I had a normal job. I mean, I was looking for a job. I got landed something. I was working 40 hours a week. But the stocks only I went back to doing what I knew best, and I turned 40 grand into about $100,000 over the course of that next year. And it controlled my life. It was it, no one talks about a sudden success. It's like playing the lottery. And you see that every Powerball or Mega Millions winner that acquires the money, like 80% of them become broken on like bankrupt within 2 3 years. And I pretty much sold everything after 2020 at the end of it. And I was up and I just cashed out everything over the next 2020, 2021. I turned 40 into 100. I sold everything and just bought a house I couldn't afford. And to this day, like sports betting, I can't even go watch a game without looking at odds, statistics, and every single sports bettor say, "I have an edge. I have an edge. Look at my parlays. They just about hit every time." Oh, if that one person, yeah, we all hear this. We see it every week. DraftKings, Kevin Hart, that shill of a human being. There needs to be better regulation on some of this stuff, man. It's destroying thousands of lives. And I walked away in one of the best situations possible. But You see people that risk it all on some bet and it goes wrong, and they just the worst thing is about to happen to them. No one should have to go through that. I mean, we're all in the same rat race to some government that doesn't care about us, but we just need to slow down, accept fate, invest like Warren Buffett. And for the last 2 years, I've been just letting someone else manage my money because I can't do it anymore. I can't do those 3 hour nights again. Anyway, this was a pretty dark and long twist and turn of a story, but if you made it this far, I'm sorry. Um, it's never too late to ask for help. Um, I'm sorry, guys.